A good Shabbos, my holy sisters and brothers. That was the Moshav band doing their rendition of Lecha Dodi, Come My Beloved. Let us welcome the Shabbos bride. We think of Shabbos as a queen, as a bride. We go out to welcome her. Shabbos is almost here. We're so excited. Let's light up the darkness. We've got a fairly short daf today. We're going to read all of it, and we're going to learn some beautiful lessons about blessings and distinctions. The importance of making distinctions, a lesson we learn from the Almighty. Who is with us today as we get it going on a fine Friday afternoon? Bill says Shabbat Shalom from Berkeley. Paula sends some nice emojis. James says Shabbat Shalom. Paul in Chicago. Randy in Florida. Yehudit wishing everybody a rejuvenating Shabbos. Jill in Illinois. Helen in Tampa. Christo, you're in Lubbock, right? He says he loves this rendition of Lecha Dodi. I have it on my iPhone. Good Shabbos, everyone. Robin in Añasco, Puerto Rico. Bienvenida, qué bueno que estás con nosotros. And in Merced, Elsbieta in Des Moines, South Seattle, Washington. Welcome, everybody. All right. Over there on the YouTube side, Samantha says good Shabbos, and Marjorie with us from Georgie, wishing everyone a good and Erev Shabbos. Welcome, welcome all. All right. Let me just get set here. Beautiful. Where are we holding? This is Daf Kuf Daled, page 104, here in Tractate Shabbos, the fourth volume of the Talmud, the laws of, did I say Shabbos? Tractate Pesachim, the fourth volume of the Talmud, the laws of Passover, and a very timely time to be studying these laws because we're in that final month before Pesach, before Passover, when we are obligated to be reviewing the laws and customs of Passover. Something we do before every festival. We start studying its laws and traditions a month before. Here we're in chapter 10. Which we're starting to really get into the laws of the Seder, as opposed to we spent so much time studying how is, customs that we could only do in ancient times when the temple was standing, like bringing the Paschal lamb, the Passover offering. Now we're much more into, a Seder means the order, so it's the order of the Passover evening, and irrespective of the fact that we can no longer eat the Passover offering, the lamb or the goat, we certainly are obligated and do fulfill that obligation to eat matzah on the first night of Passover and outside Israel on the first 2 nights of Passover. We talked a little bit about the Mishna, which was a short Mishna at the beginning of this chapter, talked about that we stop eating in the afternoon so that we will eat that matzah with hunger. And once we got into this idea of from when we should stop eating, basically mid-afternoon, on the afternoon before Passover begins, this year Passover begins Saturday night. So, I have to check that out. I don't think that we ever fast on Shabbos, so we probably wouldn't fulfill that teaching. However, once we got into this idea of stopping eating and interruptions in a meal, like when you start a Friday lunch that runs long and then it becomes Shabbos, do you make a concluding blessing on that meal and then make Kiddush and then make the new blessings as you continue that meal, but now you think of it as Shabbos dinner? We discussed that, and that led to a discussion of Havdala, and we're still in that. So Havdala is all about, we make a blessing. Normally we say Havdala when we leave Shabbos and return to the mundane days of the 6 days of the week. We leave the holiness of Shabbos and enter the 6 days of the work week. And we bless God for making distinctions between holiness, between the holy and the mundane, between light and darkness, etc. And we're actually talking about the formula of that blessing, the Havdalah blessing. And we've also been talking a little bit about how it gets altered when we go from Shabbos to Yom Tov, which will happen this year, right? We're going to go from Shabbos to Passover, which begins Saturday night. And also a little bit of a conversation we'll have today of, well, what happens if we go from Yom Tov to Shabbos, which is a little bit different. We do say Havdala when we exit Yom Tov, when we exit a festival. When the festival ends, the first day of Passover is a festival day, or the first 2 days outside Israel. And then when we return to Chol HaMoed, the intermediate days of the festival, we still cannot eat bread. We still cannot have leaven in our homes, but we can go back to work. So those are the intermediate days. It's a lesser holiness than the first festival days. And so as we leave the festival days, or as we leave Yom Kippur, or when we leave Shavuos, for example, and we return to just the regular days, we also make a Havdala similar to the Havdala of Shabbos, but of course a little bit different since it's not Shabbos. All right, let's get into it. We're going to open at the very bottom of page 103 on the B side. We actually read this paragraph yesterday, but it sets up what we're going to be talking today. So Rabbi Elazar said that Rabbi Oshaya said, one who decreases the number of distinctions in the text of Havdala. So just so we know what we're talking about, why don't I just read that text right now? So this is just from the Koran Siddur, a standard traditional Jewish prayer book. This is the Nusach Sfard, right? So there's distinctions within the Orthodox Jewish world, or within the traditional Jewish world, between the Ashkenaz Nusach, which is a kind of, everything is halakhically correct, but there's just some minor variations. Ashkenaz versus Sephard versus Sephardic versus Arizal. What those exactly mean, we could talk about on another day. But this is Nusach Sfard, and it's really the same. Havdalah is the same in all modern prayer books. And so we would say we're holding the cup of wine. First we would sing, Hine El Yeshuasi, behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord is my strength and song. He has become my salvation. With joy you will draw water from the springs of salvation. Salvation is the Lord's. On your people is your blessing. Selah. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. Selah. Lord of hosts, happy the man who trusts in you. Lord, save. May the King answer us on the day we call. For the Jews there was light and gladness, joy and honor. We just read that at Purim. That's from the book of Esther. So may it be for us. I will lift up the cup of salvation and call upon the name of the Lord. That's just the preparation to make Havdalah. Then we make 3 blessings in a row. First, we say, blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. That's the blessing for wine, but we don't drink it, right? Normally, when we say blessing on wine, we would then immediately drink it, but right now we don't. We hold it in abeyance. Then we say, blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the various spices, and then we do smell a spice. People often use cloves, but it can be any fragrant herbage. And then we say, blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the lights of the fire. And we have our Havdalah candle, our multi-wick Havdalah candle. Once we say the blessing, we inspect that we can tell the difference between where the fingernail ends and the finger begins. So we're seeing it by the light of the Havdalah candle, which we just blessed that light that God created. Then we say so that's the Havdalah ceremony, and then we come to the Havdalah blessing. The Havdalah blessing goes, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who distinguishes between sacred and secular, between light and darkness, between Israel and the nations, between the 7th day and the 6 days of work. Blessed are you, Lord, who distinguishes between sacred and secular. So how many distinctions were listed in the Havdalah blessing? We started with a blessing, right? Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who distinguishes secular between light and darkness, between Israel and the nations. Then between the 7th day and the 6 days of work. But is that actually blessing him for making that distinction? We're going to be talking about that today. And then we repeat the formula of blessing. Blessed are you, Lord, who distinguishes between sacred and secular, which is how we started. So whenever we make a major blessing, we begin and end with the same concept of that blessing. Again, we'll be talking about that momentarily. But on this question of how many distinctions were drawn in that, seems like 4, maybe it's only 3. So Rabbi Lazar said that Rabbi Oshaya said, one who decreases the number of distinctions in the text of Havdala should not decrease them to less than 3. And the one who increases the number of distinctions should not increase them to more than 7. So you have a choice how many distinctions you're going to list there. Okay, over time it became formalized and everyone says it the same way. But at the time that these traditions were forming, some said 3 distinctions, some said 4 distinctions, some said 7 distinctions, some made no distinctions. They only said the blessing. Blessed are you who separates between sacred and secular. But the master, so that was the teaching that's being brought down. This is a comment on the example that was given yesterday, where we had this same formula. When Rava made Havdala, right, he said, he blessed the one who distinguishes between sacred and secular, between light and darkness, between Israel and the nations, between the 7th day and the 6 days of work. Then he would repeat the blessing. So Rav Yaakov Bar Abba said to him, why do you need all this? And didn't Rav Yehuda say that Rav said that it is sufficient to just say, blessed is God who distinguishes between sacred and secular. So Rava answers him and says, we have a tradition from Rabbi Lazar, who said in the name of Rabbi Oshaya, that the one who recites Havdala should make no less than 3 and no more than 7 distinctions in the text of that blessing. But the master did not say 3 distinctions, nor did he say 7, as he actually mentioned 4 distinctions. He said to him, so Rava now answers, well, in truth, that is inaccurate, as the distinction between the 7th day and the 6 days of work is not considered a separate statement of distinction. Sounds like one, but it isn't. Rather, this distinction is mentioned because it is similar to the conclusion of the blessing. And Rabbi Yehuda said that Shmuel said, one who recites Havdala must say an expression that is similar to the conclusion, near the conclusion of the blessing, to emphasize the connection between the blessing and its conclusion. And the scholars of Pumbedisa say that one must say a phrase similar to the beginnings of blessings near their conclusions. So whenever you have a major blessing, you should start and end with a similar concept. So let's take a look at this. For example, if we look at the Friday night blessing, the Friday night Kiddush, right? So when you're making Kiddush, what do? First, you recite the passage from Genesis 1 and 2, where God has completed the work of creation, and then He blesses the 7th day and hallows it, and that's why we make Kiddush and observe Shabbos as a rest day and a holiday, and the most important of holidays, right? So when you make Kiddush, first you say this text from the Torah, and it was evening and it was morning, the 6th day. Then the heavens and the earth were completed and all their array. With the 7th day, God completed the work which He had done. He ceased on the 7th day from all the work He had done. God blessed the 7th day and declared it holy, because on it He rested from all His work which He had created to make. That's the setup, right? So just like we had a setup for Havdala, that's the setup for the Kiddush. Then what do? Where the leader at the table is holding the glass of wine, and he says, blessed are you, Lord our God, King, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. That's the blessing over the wine, but we don't drink it yet, just like at Havdala. Then we have the actual blessing of Kiddush, of sanctifying this holiday, right? God made it holy, so we're blessing God for making this day, right, Friday night, as we enter Shabbos, and the Shabbos dinner that we're having, this is Kiddush at home, so we bless God for sanctifying this day, sanctifying meaning making it kadosh, holy, and that root in Hebrew means separating, right? So holiness is all about separating, distinguishing what is holy from what is not. So first we say, blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. And then we say, blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has made us holy through his commandments, who has favored us in love and favor, and given us his holy Sabbath as a heritage, a remembrance of the work of creation. That's why we read that bit of Genesis from the end of the creation narrative at the end of the 6 days. Who gave us his holy Sabbath as a heritage, a remembrance of the work of creation, first among the holy days of assembly. Shabbos is the most important holiday, and it comes every week. What a gift. A remembrance of the exodus from Egypt, for you chose us and sanctified us from among all the peoples, and in love and favor gave us your holy Sabbath as a heritage. And then we repeat, blessed are you, Lord, who sanctifies the Sabbath. And then we would drink the wine, right? So again, it's that same structure. We have a setup, then we bless the cup that we're going to be using to recite the Kiddush over. Then we make the blessing that is actually what we're doing. In Havdala, separating between the holiness of Sabbath and the week to come, and at Kiddush on Friday night, separating from the days of the week and coming into the holiness of Shabbos. And when we make the actual Kiddush blessing for that sanctification of Shabbos, we say at the beginning and at the end of that unit, right? We start and end with that blessing as we're learning here on our page in the Talmud. Right? And the scholars of Pumbedisa say that one must say a phrase similar to the beginnings of blessings near their conclusions. Now, with regard to the previously cited dispute, the Gemara asks, what is the practical difference between them? Since the beginning and ending of, right, so it said that we should repeat what the subject of the blessing near the end of the blessing, and the other one said at the beginning of the blessing and at the end of the blessing. So what is between them? My benehu, right? That's Aramaic, that very important Aramaic phrase. My benehu, what is between them? I'm drawing special emphasis today to this idea that God makes distinctions. We learn from God to make distinctions, and so much of what we learn from our sages is about making distinctions. We live in this modern world where there's a kind of a desire to homogenize so many things that everybody should be the same, everybody should be the same, everybody should be the same. We're not all the same. We're all different in many ways. We're not saying one's better than another, but we are acknowledging the distinctions between day and night, the distinctions between young and old, the distinctions between light and darkness, the distinctions between sacred and secular. And the more we train ourselves to, identify distinctions, the keener our ability to see God's hand in this world will be. Okay, let's continue. So what is the practical difference between them? Since the beginning and end of the blessing generally address the same topic, what is the difference between these two opinions? The Gemara responds, the practical difference between them is in the case of a festival that occurs after Shabbos, as one concludes this Havdala with the phrase, who separates between sacred and sacred, right? When you're leaving Shabbos to enter a Yom Tov, and leaving Shabbos to enter a festival day, like the first day of Passover, or Shavuos, or the first day of Sukkot, or Yom Kippur. Well, you wouldn't be making Kiddush on Yom Kippur because we're fasting all day. But still, when you're leaving the holiness of Shabbos to enter the holiness of a festival, so we don't say who distinguishes between sacred and secular. Then we say, blessed are you, Lord our God, who distinguishes between sacred and sacred. Because even though they're both sacred, the nature of their sacredness is different. The one who said that one must mention an expression similar to the beginnings of blessings near their conclusions would say that one is not required to say between the sanctity of Shabbos and the sanctity of the festival you have distinguished before concluding the blessing, as the beginning of the blessing refers simply to the sacred and the profane. And according to the one who said that one must say a phrase similar to the conclusions of blessings near their conclusions, one is required to say between the sanctity of Shabbos and the sanctity of the festival you have distinguished. The Gemara returns to the aforementioned matter itself. Rabbi Elazar said that Rabbi Oshaya said, one who decreases the number of distinctions mentioned in Havdala, the blessing over distinguishing between Shabbos and the week, should not decrease their number to less than 3, nor increase them to more than 7. The Gemara raises an objection from the Tosefta. The Tosefta is that very first layer of commentary on the Mishnah, nearly contemporaneous with the Mishnah. One who says statements of distinctions at the conclusion of Shabbos and at the conclusion of festivals and at the conclusion of Yom Kippur and at the conclusion of Shabbos that leads into a festival and at the conclusion of a festival that leads into the intermediate days of the festival. Right? So we say Havdala when we're going from holiness to no holiness or from holiness to less holiness, which was all those examples were. However, one does not mention distinctions at the conclusion of a festival that leads into Shabbos, as the sanctity of Shabbos is greater than that of a festival. One who is accustomed to reciting distinctions may recite many distinctions, and one who is not accustomed to doing so recites only one distinction. This ruling implies that there is no absolute requirement to mention more than one distinction. Again, we're just accustomed to the fact that we have those 4 distinctions, or some would say it's only 3, in the Havdala formula as it's come down to us thousands of years later. But when they were still working out how it was going to be, some said 7 distinctions, some said 3 or 4 distinctions, some said no distinctions. They just made the blessing, blessed are you, Lord our God, who distinguishes between sacred and secular. The Gemara answers, it is a dispute between Tanaim, right? So the rabbis of the Mishnah were disputing this topic, and that's why there's so many different streams of practice even back at this time. Rabbi Yochanan said, the son of sacred ones, right? So this is a person whose title, whose nickname, the way he's known is he is the son of holy ones. He recites only one distinction. But the people who were accustomed to recite 3, but the people, meaning the average person, was accustomed to recite 3 distinctions. The Gemara asks, who is this person called the son of, that just happens. Okay, there we go. Glad I kept that screen in front of me, and I apologize for it leaving. It came back. Okay, where am I? So who is this person called the son of holy ones? I fixed it. Who is this person called the son of holy ones? The Gemara answers, this is Rabbi Menachem bar Simai. And why did they call him the son of sacred ones? Because he would not look at the forms on coins, which were occasionally idolatrous symbols or some other prohibited image, right? So this was one of the sages who sort of kept himself at such a high level, demanded of himself to be so rigorous in avoiding even a whiff of avodah zarah, even a whiff of idolatry. And these people were living and teaching in Israel at the time that it was oppressed by the Roman Empire. And from time to time, the coins that were used in the realm had idolatrous imagery. In other words, the image of some god that the Romans worshipped on the coin. And so this is a person who would just, he held himself to such a strict standard that he wouldn't look at coins lest his gaze falls upon, a graven image used for idolatry. And the Gemara relates that Rabbi Shmuel bar Edi sent Rabbi Menachem bar Simai the following message. This one who's so holy he wouldn't even look at the images on the coins. My brother Hananiah says that one should mention only one distinction. However, the Gemara concludes, and the halacha is not in accordance with that opinion. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, one who recites Havdala must say distinctions similar to the distinctions stated explicitly in the Torah. So now they're saying, okay, we've stated that these distinctions, God who distinguishes between sacred and secular, between light and darkness, between Israel and the nations, the days of the week, etc. So on what basis do they pick the distinctions that get included in that paragraph? And some people even list 7 distinctions. So which distinctions do they pick, and how do they pick them? So according to this, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi says they should be similar to distinctions that are stated explicitly in the Torah, and one should not add other distinctions. Well, the Gemara immediately raises an objection from a Baraisa. How should one say the order of the distinctions in Havdala? One recites, who distinguishes between sacred and secular, between light and darkness, between Israel and the nations, and between the 7th day and the 6 days of work. Those are the ones that made it into the final text. But then he continues, between the ritually impure and the ritually pure, right? So between Tameh and Tahor. If you've been with us for a while, you're very familiar with those concepts, right? Between what is ritually impure and what is ritually pure. Something becomes ritually impure if, for example, it comes into contact with a corpse, with a dead body. It's not because you did anything wrong. You did something beautiful. You buried a dead body in a cemetery. That's actually the biggest mitzvah that there is. To take care of the dead is extremely valued mitzvah. But if you do that, you become ritually impure. Then you have to go through a purification process before you can re-enter the temple, because only people who are tahor, ritually pure, can enter the temple. There's so many laws in the Torah about when you become tameh and how you then again become tahor. So God distinguishes between tameh and tahor. Also, between the sea and the dry land, between the upper waters and the lower waters, right? That's on the 2nd day of creation, right? On the first day, he creates light and distinguishes it from darkness. And on the 2nd day of creation, he creates a rakia, right? A firmament in the sky that separates between the upper waters and the lower waters. I've always understood those to be not like water in the ocean, but that kind of spiritual fluidity that was, the absolutely perfect essence of God, the endless infinite light of God, the Ein Sof, separated from our physical universe, where, before everything was formed, there was still kind of like whatever the building blocks of reality were going to be as God put together the universe. But he first made a distinction, a separation between where the universe would be and where the rest of the infinity of God would be. So between the upper waters and the lower waters. And between priests, Levites, and Israelites, right? So Israelites is just, an Israelite is a Jew. A Levite is a descendant of Levi, right? The third son of Jacob, right? Reuben, Shimon, Levi. So the third son, and Moses and his brother Aaron were Levites, and the Levites eventually would be charged with taking care of holy matters for the Jewish people, and for that reason they did not inherit land in Israel. And then a subset within the Levites are the descendants of Aaron. Those are the Kohanim, the Cohens, who are the priests themselves. Right? So God set these distinctions up between Israelite, Levite, and Cohen. And so this is an extended version of Havdala, which includes references to the 7 distinctions. So somebody recites 7 distinctions, that's what he says. Now the Baraisa continues, and one concludes the blessing with the order of creation. Blessed is he who arranges the order of creation, or who orders creation. And others say that one concludes with who fashions creation. Rabbi Yosei, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, says that one concludes with the phrase who sanctifies Israel. The Gemara explains its objection. And if what Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said is so, the distinctions between the sea and the dry land should not be mentioned, as the term distinction is not written with regard to this issue. Right? So in the account of creation in Genesis, he doesn't say who distinguishes between the sea and dry land. I mean, obviously God creates the oceans and then the land, and there's a separation, but the term lehavdil, distinguishing, is not used there. And so it should not be mentioned because the term distinction is not written with regard to this issue. And the Gemara answers, okay, so remove from here the distinction between the sea and dry land. The Gemara asks, if so, the distinction between the 7th day and the 6 days of work should also not be counted in the tally of the distinctions, as it is mentioned only to repeat something similar to the conclusion. It's not there because it's one of the distinctions being listed. It's there to fulfill this obligation that when you're making a major blessing, to have something similar to the conclusion near the conclusion. Consequently, this text of Havdala lacks one more distinction, and this means that there are not 7 distinctions in total. They say in answer to this question, the distinction between priests, Levites, and Israelites is actually 2 matters, i.e. it counts as 2 separate distinctions. One distinction is between Levites and Israelites, as it is written. At that time, the Lord separated the tribe of Levi to bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord. That's in Deuteronomy 10:8. And there's a further distinction between the priests and the Levites. As it is written, the sons of Amram, Aaron and Moses, and Aaron was separated that he should be sanctified as most holy, he and his sons forever. That's from First Book of Chronicles 23:13. The Gemara asks, what formula should be used to conclude the blessing of Havdala? Rav said the blessing should conclude with the phrase, who sanctifies Israel. Shmuel said the concluding phrase is, who distinguishes between sacred and secular. The Gemara adds that Abaye, and some said it was Rav Yosef, cursed it. He would become angry at one who concluded the blessing in accordance with the opinion of Rav, who said that Havdala ends, he who sanctifies Israel. It was taught in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, anyone who concludes the Havdala blessing with the combined formula, who sanctifies Israel and distinguishes between sacred and secular, God will lengthen his days and years. How do we conclude Havdala? Blessed are you, Lord, who distinguishes between sacred and secular. So we went with the opinion of Shmuel, and that's how the halacha ended up. However, the Gemara states, and the halacha is not in accordance with that opinion. Instead, the halacha is in accordance with Shmuel. The Gemara relates, Ula happened to come to Pumbedisa. Ula is the sage who traveled often between the sages in Israel and the sages in Bavel in the Persian Empire, and brought teachings from one place to the other. Ula happened to come to Pumbedisa. Rav Yehuda said to his son, Rav Yitzchak, go and bring him a basket of fruit as a gift, and while you are there, observe how he recites Havdala. Right? So again, the formula was evolving, and people wanted to know how prominent sages did it, and then they were going to decide sort of which sage they were going to follow and establish their own family tradition. So Rav Yehuda said to his son Rav Yitzchak, go bring a basket of fruit to Ula, who's visiting us here, and he's in Pumbedisa, and while you're there, observe how he recites Havdala. Rav Yitzchak himself did not go. In his place, he sent to him his young student, Abaye. Abaye would end up being a very major sage himself, but at this time he was just a young student of Rav Yitzchak. When Abaye came back, Rav Yitzchak said to him, how did Ula recite the blessing of Havdala? Abaye said to him that Ula said, blessed is he who distinguishes between sacred and profane, but he did not say anything further. It seems like he didn't make all the distinctions. This is more like how Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi did it, that he just finished with he who distinguishes between sacred and secular. Rabbi Yitzchak came before his father, Rav Yehuda, who said to him, how did Ula recite Havdala? And he said to him, well, to tell you the truth, I myself did not go. Instead, I sent my student Abaye, who said to me that Ula recited, who distinguishes between sacred and secular. Rav Yehuda grew angry and said to him, the master's haughtiness. Now he's talking to his son and saying the master. So he's saying, you are a sage, But I told you to go learn from Ula personally. And because you're already considered a sage whom people recall the master, you were haughty and proud and decided instead of going personally, you would send your young student to go. And because you did that, you missed a big opportunity. The master's haughtiness and the master's pride caused the master to act in a way that ensured that the halacha will not be said in his name. In other words, had you gone yourself, this law, this halacha, would have been attributed to you. But due to your haughtiness and pride, it will be transmitted in the name of Abaye. In other words, when people say why they say it this way, they would say, we learn the halacha from Abaye in the name of Ula, in the name of, I'm not sure who, maybe Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, but Rav Yitzhak did not, Rav Yitzhak's name would not be included in that chain of transmission because he was busy and he sent his student instead. That's a lesson worth learning. It's funny, I was just talking with a friend about this morning, that when we say, there's a phrase that we say, and we say, for example, before we make motzi at a Shabbos table, we say, Poseches yadecha masbia lechol chai ratzon. You open your hand and satisfy the will or the desire of every living thing. Ratzon, that word ratzon. So that's from Psalm 145. The importance here is that this word ratzon, will, its root is Reish Tzadi, which is ratz, which means hurry or run, right? So what does it mean to have a will, to have a desire? It's something that you run to do, right? So we learn that from the root of the word. So, and there's another teaching in Pirkei Avos, run to do a mitzvah. Run to do a minor mitzvah, for you do not know the relative importance of all the mitzvahs. Sometimes it seems like one mitzvah is a big and mighty important mitzvah and another one is smaller, but you don't know. And any mitzvah has the potential to guard your life, to save your life, right? It's possible, and that's why we give $1 of tzedakah, of charity, when somebody's going to go on a journey. And we give him $1, and so that he should give that dollar to a needy person when he reaches his destination. Until he reaches his destination, he's my agent in performing this mitzvah. And because he's engaged in a mitzvah for the entire journey, so he gets an extra measure of protection. Another place where we saw this, my friend Tzipora Bank was mentioning this morning. I offered this in her name, in Tzipora's name. That one of the reasons why the Black Plague in Europe was blamed on the Jews, and anti-Semites throughout history will blame any calamity, whether it's a natural disaster or a disease like the Black Plague, on the Jews. They'll blame anything on the Jews. But a specific reason why they blame the Jews is that the Jews seem to have a lower mortality rate during the Black Plague than the people around them. I've heard that not everyone says that's true, that the Jews were dying just as much as the others. But let's just say for a moment that it's true that the Jews had a lower mortality rate. Less Jews were dying during the Black Plague than the people around them. Why? Because whenever Jews eat bread, we have to wash our hands. Right? And when we make that blessing of washing our hands, we actually don't say, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us to wash the hands." That's not what we say. We say, "Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctifies us with commandments and commands us to immerse the hands," right? So the mitzvah that we're doing is immersing the hands because we purify them. It's like we're putting them in a mikvah. We're purifying our hands before we then go to the Shabbos table or even the regular table, regular during the week, and eat a meal because we're so grateful that the bread on our plate, and what makes it a meal is that it includes bread, that bread came from the earth thanks to the good grace of God, and it was given to me. But to have a valid immersion in water, there can be no interposition between your skin and the water you're immersing in. So before you immerse the hands, you do have to wash the hands with soap and water. So there in medieval Europe, when hygiene was not really known, the Jews, just as a matter of religious obligation, were washing their hands much more often than the rest of the population. And as we've learned in COVID, washing your hands can be a very helpful practice in lessening the transmission of disease. So that's an example of where a mitzvah protects your life, even though they didn't know it at the time, that it was working in that way. Let's continue. The Gemara raises an objection to Ula's practice from a Baraisa. With regard to all blessings, and I'm almost done, so if you have questions or comments, put them in now. The Gemara raises an objection to Ula's practice from a Baraisa. With regard to all blessings, one begins their recitation with blessed, Baruch, and concludes reciting them with blessed, Baruch, except for blessings over mitzvahs, blessings over fruit, a blessing that is juxtaposed to another blessing in the order of prayer, for example, during the Amidah prayer and the final blessing after Shema. Meaning, for example, if I'm going to sit down and I'm going to have bread, right? I've already made a blessing over washing my hands, and I didn't say, "Blessed are you, Lord," who commands us to wash our hands. "Blessed are you, Lord," who commands us to wash. I don't say blessed twice. I just said that once. And when I come to the table and eat the bread, I'll say, "Blessed are you, Lord, our God, ruler of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth." Just one utterance of blessed, right? And that's because these are simple blessings. It's not that they're minor, it's that they're simple, they're straightforward, so you don't have to actually use the language of blessing twice. But as we've seen at the beginning of our class with Kiddush and with Havdala, we say, "Blessed are you who sanctifies," etc. "Blessed are you who sanctifies," or "Blessed who distinguishes," and "Blessed who distinguishes," right? We begin and end a major blessing with that language of blessing. And Ula didn't seem to be doing that. He just said, "Blessed are you," who distinguishes between sacred and secular. Don't we need to say it twice? Now, here's a list of exceptions, right? That when we're blessing a mitzvah, the fact that we're doing a mitzvah, like we're commanded to wash our hands, so we make a blessing over that, or a blessing over food, like that blessing over bread. Okay, then we don't have the double blessing language, but those are included in this list of exceptions. Or the one who is good and who does good is exceptional, as it is a blessing that is juxtaposed to another blessing, and yet it begins with blessed and does not conclude with blessed. This is difficult for the opinion of Ula, who began but did not conclude the blessing of Havdala with blessed. He didn't say blessed twice. The Gemara answers, Ula could have said to you, this blessing is also considered like a blessing over a mitzvah, since it's like we're obligated to make this blessing at the end of Shabbos, and so maybe we only need the simple blessing formula. And the Gemara clarifies this response. What is the reason that blessings over mitzvahs do not require a distinctive conclusion? It is because a blessing over a mitzvah is a statement of praise. As it does not include anything unrelated to the praise, like a request or a supplication, it is unnecessary to add a separate concluding blessing. This Havdala blessing is also comprised only of praise, right? So when we don't add in our major formula, please God do something else for us, or we're just praising God for creating the situation as it is, maybe we don't need that language of the double blessing formula. All right, that's what I've got for us today. Let me go to questions and comments here on page 104. Hold on a second. It's not coming in quite yet. I have to sign back in to the Google document that Nina and I use to communicate. I'm here in the office. She's typically in her office or in the house logging the questions and passing them to me by this Google document. So there are no questions today, but Bill makes a comment. I've also heard that the situation with the Black Death in Jewish population centers was helped by the fastidiousness around keeping rats from the food, rats being a creeping thing, which of course cut down on the fleas that actually carried the contagion. Exactly. Well done. Okay, my friends, that's what I've got for us today. May we all be blessed with such a sweet Shabbos. The whole world could use the joy and meaning and peace of Shabbos. So I say Shabbat Shalom, a good Shabbos to you, and all the best.